Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Gray Matter. Well, if you're like me, you're getting a little bit excited about Christmas. In our family, we actually celebrate German Christmas. We just had that. That's the Weihnachtsabend, December the 6th, where the kids get some of their presents. And of course, as you go around, you see the Christmas lights and silver bells and all of that. And so we thought that it would be a good thing and worthwhile to highlight a Christmas charity, one that is not just a Christmas charity, it's one that operates year round, but has, let's say, a Christmas focus. And so we're going to be talking with a lady today who is spearheading and is I guess, the main face on a wonderful charity that operates in Alberta out of Calgary called Gems for Gems. And her name is Jordan Guildford. So she's going to come on. She's going to talk about the charity and how it came about and all the wonderful work that it's doing. And we're actually going to ask people if they want to donate, and I hope that they do. So as we always do, before we introduce her properly, we've got a few aphorisms from our board, and these ones I think you'll get a sense. Have to do with children, have a focus on children, and also are coming from a sort of statesman-like place, and you'll see what I mean. The first one is one that I actually stole from Jordan's website, and this is from Gandhi, and it's "Be the change you wish to see in the world." Second one is from the late John F. Kennedy. Children are the world's most valuable resource and its best hope for the future. Next is from another American president, also one, sadly, who was assassinated, Abraham Lincoln. Teach the children so it will not be necessary to teach the adults. And finally, from the late, really brilliant and courageous leader from South Africa, Nelson Mandela, who wrote, "We owe our children, the most vulnerable citizens in any society, a life free from violence and fear." So who do we have on the show today? Well, a lady named Jordan Guildford. Jordan is described as a small town girl who came up with a small way to ease the suffering of domestic abuse survivors. This idea grew into a movement and has been joined by thousands of men and women across Canada, all rallying to end the cycle of domestic abuse through the empowerment and education of survivors. She says, "We believe each one of us can and must be the change we want to see in the world." Gems for Gems is proving just how powerful that mindset can be. And she's quoted here as saying, "Shoot for the moon, and worst case, you'll land in the stars." That statement has been staggeringly and awe-inspiring true for her from day one of developing the concept of Gem for Gems. She says, "In truth, I had no idea how tenacious and impactful Gems would become. All I knew was that more and more people kept wanting to help, and I couldn't let them or this dream of mine down. When the path forward was being so supported," she says, "I have continued to do my utmost every day since to do justice to the sacrifices and kindness of so many for Gems. I'm utterly consumed by gratitude and focused on doing my absolute best to further the impact of our organization." She says, "I'm truly honored and humbled daily to be leading this incredible group of people, to have my dreams championed by the collective force of the board of directors, the ambassador team, and the ever-growing community around Gems for Gems." She says, "Thank you all, and I cannot wait to see what we can accomplish next." Wow, what a great message. Welcome to the program, Jordan Guildford.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be here.
Great. Well, you're going to have to do some talking about Gems for Gems. Can you manage that today?
I think I can manage that.
Excellent. So I'm sure some of the people who are listening, taking this in, know about Gems for Gems. Maybe they've donated, or they've been a recipient, or they've heard about it. But for those who haven't, how about going a little bit into the origin story? We had a bit of a teaser there in the opening, but how did this come about? Obviously, this is your brainchild. You sort of envisioned this and brought this out of the ether. So can you tell us a little bit about your background and how all of this got started?
Sure. So essentially, Gems for Gems began in 2015, and it began with our jewelry drive, which is where the name Gems for Gems originated. Um, the jewelry drive was inspired by a story from my childhood, and essentially, I was 14 years old, and for most of while we were growing up, my family and I had very, very little. We didn't have heat, hot water, food often. But at Christmas time, my grandmother would give us each $20 to be able to go to our local church bazaar and purchase Christmas gifts for each other. So we would buy hats, mittens, scarves, and we would get excited for what pattern they were. And I know it sounds really menial, but for us, it was all we knew, and we loved it. But this one particular Christmas, I started seeing my mom as a woman, as opposed to, that shift when you start seeing your parents as people rather than strictly as your parent and hero and all of that. And I started seeing that she was doing everything alone. My dad wasn't in the picture. And so I asked my brother and my sister if they wanted to pool their money together to be able to get mom something special for Christmas. And they said yes immediately. So we went to the store and we purchased her what it was a little bracelet, and it looked like leaves woven together, and it had what we thought were diamonds, but most definitely plastic. But it was pretty and sparkly. And we were so excited to give it to her on Christmas morning. But on Christmas morning, when she opened it, she just started bawling and left the room. And it was devastating for us. But when she came back, she had done her hair and her makeup and put on her best clothes. And she told us that this little piece of jewelry put her back on her own radar. And I told that story within 6 months of moving here from Nova Scotia to a room full of ladies who were heavily involved in beautiful Christmas initiatives for children here in Calgary. But because of my background, I know that if the children have nothing, the moms have even less, especially in situations where there's poverty and domestic abuse and all of that. So I decided to collect gently used jewelry from women in the public and try to do what we did for my mom. To this day, my mom still wears that bracelet whenever she dresses up. And we were incredibly fortunate to be championed very quickly. We had only 3 weeks to go before that Christmas. And I collected in one location. It was Orange Theory in Leighton in Calgary. And they rallied so heavily that with a goal of 22 packages of 3 to 5 items, we were able to do 436 packages in 3 weeks. And now this Christmas will have us over 20,000 across Canada. So that's 20,000 women who have been impacted because of the women in the public doing what they can and being a part of this beautiful initiative. So that's the origin. That's how it all started. And then just more and more people kept coming on board. And like I said, I thought it was wrong to turn people away. And I know a lot of organizations do, and I'm not saying that isn't the right thing for their organization, but for us and for what I was doing, if someone wants to be able to be part of something beautiful, then I want to be able to make it possible for them. So I did. And I created an ambassador program, which has now grown to over 150 ambassadors across Canada. And we have 5 celebrity ambassadors in there now too, which is amazing. And I can't even believe it. And because of the increased manpower, we've launched our scholarship program and Hope's Cradle and our Thrive series. And it's all been possible. It is a true testament to what's possible when like-minded people come together and rally around a specific cause. It's inspiring to me daily.
I want to dive in and talk about some of those things in more detail. Before doing that, though, I have to say, Albertans, I'm biased, but Albertans really are amazing, aren't they? The generosity. Yeah, I know you're from Nova Scotia, and I'm sure there's wonderful people out there too. But it never ceases to amaze me, the generosity and the willingness of Albertans to reach out and help, in the community. I think it's one of the great things about being in Alberta, and I would say that about all the communities that you go to in our province. But let's coming back to you. So a little bit more about your background. So where'd you go to school, and what is your your career like? What do you do in your life that led you sort of to get involved with this? What is your particular background?
Well, obviously, while I was under my mom's roof, poverty was an ever-present element. But I also got a full scholarship to a private school in Nova Scotia, King's Edgehill, and
Mm,
that was a tremendous leg up for me,
mhm,
um, a humongous leg up. And then I went to Dalhousie, and I finished at St. Mary's. My background's in a BSc in psychology, and that, I mean, fascinating to me, and obviously has helped me significantly with this. But I was very, very happily a stay-at-home mom prior to starting Gems for Gems, and that was the plan. I loved it,
mhm.
absolutely loved it. It was peace for me, and I'd had a really rough go for my most of my life up to that point. So it was the first time in my life that I just had complete happiness. It was lovely. But then when I got this idea for Gems, and after the first jewelry drive was so successful, I knew I wanted to continue. And then it really took on a life of its own. And I mean, it's been described before as me trying to hang on to the tail of a tiger. And it is, it has, because of the support I have just been doing my utmost to do justice to the momentum that has happened. And it's really quite incredible.
Um, you haven't been on this program before, but if you've watched it, you know that sometimes we go off on tangents.
That's okay.
I'm about to go off on one, and you're coming with me.
I'm
So
ready.
now we've discovered that you're a highly educated person. And so I want to mine from you your take on something that I've noticed that is of concern to me. I think
Mhm.
will be concern to many of the people who take in this podcast. There is a concerted campaign on the left to really to discredit and to degrade the importance of being a wife and being a mother,
Mhm.
as though every young girl, like you, who is bright and talented and is able to go off to university and become highly educated, that the sole source of meaning in their life is to be found in a career. And that that is what all young women that's what all young women in our society should be doing. Um, would you agree with me that first of all that is happening, and that is very detrimental to women in particular, that this sort of this degradation of the value, because let's face it, what are any of us without our mothers? I can
Mhm.
tell you, I mean, seriously, imagine our society without we don't have a society without mothers. Like
Mhm.
that's the bedrock of our society, our mothers.
Mhm.
And you described, even though you went off and you got this tremendous education, high academic achiever, you found this joy in just looking after your home and family, home and hearth.
Mhm.
So I'm interested to know your take on that.
I have a lot of thoughts on this.
Let's hear them. Let's hear them.
Well, one of the things that first really, I guess the first awakening around that I had was how much I loved being a stay-at-home mom. And I am an achiever by nature. Um, and so for me to shift my focus from what I had traditionally been told was where value came in from achievement, winning awards, blah, 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 that type of stuff, to shift it entirely to this and look at raising humans really well as also a huge achievement. That was my first kind of eye opening moment for myself personally. Then, as I got closer to 30, I started being aware of all the single girls in my life panicking to find a husband. And the really fascinating and what I really registered as being very sad was that it wasn't just to have a husband, it was to have children. And so it was kind of whatever man was going to propose, like, had to propose because of the timeline. And they didn't want to break up because they would be starting again, which would mean then children at 38 or whatever. So it was really fascinating to me that career driven women still felt this huge biological push and pull, strictly not around having a husband, but around having children.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when I kind of started observing things a little bit differently. And I started being unbelievably grateful that I met my husband when I did, when the checklist was, is he kind? Is he generous? Is he funny? And all the things that actually to me are, you said bedrock, the foundation of a really good lasting marriage. And I met him when I was 18. So I was so fortunate, because the checklist wasn't complicated. It was really morals driven and fit driven, as opposed to how much is he making, what does he drive, what type of lifestyle does he have, how can we bring two adult lives together. So I started looking at that really differently, and A, feeling incredibly grateful, but B, kind of looking at how our society was pushing all women to that. And then of course, when I was around that age, there was also a big turning women against each other because of that push. So there would be a lot of stay-at-home moms being like, how terrible, they're terrible mothers to their children, they're gone all the time. And then working moms, wow, they have nothing to do, their lives are so empty, can't believe they have no drive. And so we started this female on female war with each other, which I found myself in a really interesting foot in both worlds. And then when I started GEMS, I took the opportunity to start defending the stay-at-home moms and defending the working moms, because I had a foot in both worlds. And I think that if we have to follow our own compasses, and I don't think every woman would feel the way I felt about being a stay-at-home mom, but I think a lot would. And I think that it's really important to really challenge that notion that we need dual incomes, we need this, we need that. No, we don't. We need it if you want to go to a big trip to Mexico every year, if you want to do a lot of the things that the perception is come hand in hand with marriage and having a family, but you don't need it. And I think it's really important to really look at what our, you can call it soul, you can call it heart, whatever you want, but really look at what is important to us as an individual, and not how important it is on how we're perceived. And I think if people really follow their own compass, then we'd have a lot happier people, a lot happier parents, a lot happier spouses. And I think the reality for children would be very different. And I would love to be able to see that shift happen, because there's a lot of, I see a lot of sadness. I think, oh, see there, I was just about to go on another tangent.
It's okay, because this tangent is making me look like a genius, because we just found out all kinds of things about why you're involved, why you are where you are, and why you're doing what you're doing. Even explaining to some degree why Gems for Gems is, let's face it, focused on women and girls.
Mm-hmm.
We've been finding out a little bit, but maybe you could tell us that. What I think we have a sense now, but why the focus on women and girls? Not that that's wonderful. There's nothing wrong with that, but why the focus on women and girls?
Well, I've actually been asked that so many times by people who don't like that I'm focusing on women and girls primarily. And
no, I think it's great. I said I think it's great.
No. So. I know you do. And people will be like, "Do you know that men are abused as well?" I'm like, "Yes, I do." And go start your own charity then.
Sure.
It's very simple to me. I was abused. I've had several run-ins with abuse, some longer and some one-offs. And poverty, basically Gems for Gems marries the abuse that I suffered from and survived from, and then the poverty. So that's why I chose the group that I did, is because that's what's closest to my heart. And, you know, when people look at what charity to choose and all of that, I would highly recommend like figuring out what evokes an emotional response from you, and then give to that. I would love for everyone to choose Gems for Gems, but I think it's really important to, again, follow your own compass and see what sparks something in you. I also think too, in the age of the empowered woman, I think it's wonderful that we are grabbing the reins of our own life, but I think that we have missed a generation. and I'm very saddened by that. I think
Mhm.
it's. I also think that in some ways the empowered woman movement has not only isolated men but has weaponized women against men. And there's so many wonderful men out there, and I think that again it has put us on opposite sides, and we're
Mhm.
different on purpose, and we're beautifully different. And I think it's important to have an awareness around that. And yeah.
That is very, very, very interesting. And people, of course, as you know, and I think what you're sort of talking about is this whole concept of the patriarchy.
Yes.
And it may upset some people for me to say this, but I think the whole concept of the patriarchy is really just applying Marxism to human relationships. We're not warring classes. There's not a dialectic here, and so this idea
Mhm.
that the true story of human history is men oppressing women really is a lot of rubbish. That the way I see human history is like this: basically, men and women traveling together throughout history, trying to survive a planet that's constantly trying to kill us. And
Mm.
that's essentially the story of men and women. And yes, there's a lot of tragic history, there's stories along the way, men killing women, women killing men, maybe less often, but we have to allow for people like Cleopatra, I guess. But this idea that we're here to oppress each other is just, as you say, it's so counterproductive. It's evil because it pits men and women against each other when we should be naturally we're drawn obviously drawn to each other, regardless of what you think about gender. We don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But gems for gems, let's come back to this. I want to talk about some of the particulars of the charity, because
Mhm.
obviously when I looked at the website, a lot of thought went into this. So let's talk about your mission statement. It says Gems for Gems is committed to ending the cycle of domestic abuse by focusing on the economic recovery and empowerment of survivors. So we understand now that's coming from someplace very personal, for you, right? This idea that there's a cycle of abuse, and you want to protect girls from this and try to draw them out of it. So, how did you come up with the mission statement? Is that just out of your personal history, or did you get together in a room and, sort of bat this around and thought, well, we could have something from Gandhi or something from Shakespeare, and you came up with this mission statement? How did you come upon the mission statement?
Uh, I am a big believer that words are the beginning, but action is what creates change. And so when I thought about how we can actually create change and give an opportunity for change to actually occur with women, and then their children, uh, action had to be there. And for me, scholarships and really focusing on the things that could change their path forward was always going to be a pivotal piece of how we moved forward with GEMS. So I wanted to make sure that that reflected it's our the heart of what we're doing with GEMS in our mission statement. It's action is so important now. As far as the economic recovery and all of that, there's two main things that keep women returning to abusive relationships, and that is the emotional side of things and then the economic side of things. So with our scholarships specifically, we wanted to address both of those. And that's actually why we've chosen to fund trade schools as opposed to university. Now, obviously, I'm a subscriber to university, but I believe heavily in the importance of giving these women an opportunity to get economically in a position to recover, but also emotionally in a position to stand on their own 2 feet as fast as possible. And the way trade schools are built is that all of the sections are small, so there's winning. They're winning constantly. They're getting high marks, and they're doing so well, and they get the empowerment and that can-do attitude and that achievement that no one can take away from them, even if they wound up in another abusive relationship at another time. The education can't be taken away from them, and the fact that they achieved that education cannot be taken away from them. And that to me is something that will stay with the woman and constantly be a presence that she can rely on and leave or build off of.
So let's talk about these scholarships that you mentioned.
Sure.
Now, I noticed there might be more, but there's two. For
Mhm.
one of them is the Jessica Newman Memorial Scholarship. Can you tell
Mhm.
us a little bit about that one and who Jessica Newman was and what that scholarship is all about?
Sure. You know what? I think if you don't mind, Jessica Newman's a great example, but the Nadia Al Dib one was our very first, and that
Okay.
actually kind of changed the course for us moving forward. We've had 6 scholarships go out right now, and do you mind if I focus on
No,
the?
this is why we're
Okay.
here.
Okay. The reason why the Nadia Al Dib scholarship was as significant as it was is that I decided with that scholarship to start moving forward, naming each scholarship in memory of a woman who had lost their lives to domestic violence.
Mm,
And that scholarship actually also connected us with the man who has become our board chair, the homicide detective Dave Sweet. So
Mr.
it's
Sweet.
highly significant for us. Yeah. So he was actually working the case, the Nadia Aldib case, and I was connected to Nadia Aldib's sister, Rasha Aldib. Um, and it was from getting to know her family that I asked them if this was something that would be meaningful to them to name our first scholarship in memory of Nadia. And they instantly started bawling, and they were so very grateful for an opportunity for Nadia's name to live on, not just in their family and loved ones, but to take on a totally different presence in the community. And it's actually the Nadia El Dib Scholarship was awarded to a phenomenal young mother named Danielle. And she speaks for us frequently too on the importance and the life-changing opportunity our scholarship is. She's now an independent business owner, and she's thriving, which is super special to us. And so because of how successful that was and how meaningful naming that scholarship was, we've done that for every single one of them. And every single one of our graduates are self-employed business owners now and doing well independently, which is exactly what we built it for. So
So
super proud.
how do the scholarships work then? Are they sort of over a short-term period or long-term period, or how exactly are they sort of a bridge to get people through, these young ladies through a difficult time, or how exactly do they roll out?
Well, we look to what we want. The ideal candidate is someone who has already left the abusive relationship and is ready to be able to take on moving forward. So GEMS is very, very proactive. We're very solution focused. There are phenomenal charities out there that cover the wound, and we need that when you're bleeding out. We definitely need that, but that's not what our purpose is. Our purpose is to be able to give women the leg up that they need to be able to move forward, empowered and in a position to recover economically. So our ideal woman is 18 plus, has removed herself from an abusive relationship and is ready to be able to work hard. They have trade schools in front of them that they can choose from. So Abe's College is one that we've partnered with, and the Aesthetics Institute is another one. The Aesthetics Institute matches us too, which is beautiful, and we're so grateful. So every scholarship that we pay for, they give a scholarship, which is obviously fantastic as far as donors go, because it doubles the impact that donors have when they give towards our scholarship program. And so that is roughly about a year, but they're flexible, and sometimes it takes a year and a half. I think that was the longest one, is a year and a half. But yeah, so like I said, the whole point is that they're in and out as quickly as possible, but with an education that gives them the opportunity to make enough money to be able to sustain themselves and build moving forward.
Wonderful. So, tell me a little bit about Hope's Cradle. What is Hope's Cradle?
Sure. So Hope's Cradle is one of the initiatives that came out of COVID. Um, we obviously, like everyone, had
Wait,
to.
something good came out of COVID?
Yeah,
Wow.
yes, something really good came out of COVID.
Okay,
And
let's hear about it. I need to hear this.
so Hope's Cradle is a cradle in a fire station. And essentially, it's a safe surrender location for women to be able to surrender their babies anonymously. Now, kind of getting back to this whole scholarship program and getting Detective Dave Sweet on board as our board chair, we have a high level of awareness of the frequency that babies are unsafely abandoned. So there's a lot of interesting things about Hope's Cradle, but one of them is that when you abandon a baby elsewhere, so there's ditches and dumpsters and alleys and all kinds of stuff
Oh,
that
so this is actually happening a lot,
yes,
right in
yes,
Calgary. I think a
yes,
lot of people would be shocked to learn that.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
So that's all criminal. That's all a criminal activity. When
Mhm.
you surrender a baby in Hope's Cradle, it is not criminal, but it has the exact same anonymity. So the police
Mhm.
will not be pursuing the mother or whoever it was that surrendered the baby in Hope's Cradle. So that's a huge leg up. And the reason why that was so important to us is we there's a lot of trafficked victims and victims of abuse, young girls who get pregnant and would get tossed out of their family home. So we really wanted to be able to eliminate that one piece, which is the anonymity that is having girls choose unsafe abandonments versus adoption or something like that.
Mhm.
So Hope's Cradle is that middle ground, and there's a lot to it, but the essentially it is a place to be able to keep that baby's heart beating, protects the mother, everything. So it's simple, but it's powerful. And we've done a lot to be able to ensure that the mother is also taken care of and very respected through the whole process. There's an envelope inside that has a medical form for her to fill out on her and the birth father with whatever information is possible, and she mails it back in. It's a postage page and already addressed. And there's also a guided letter there too, so she can send back final letter to her baby. We've also provided 30 days for a woman to be able to change her mind and reclaim the baby as well, which to me is also really pivotal, because it could be that the woman is in danger and the baby's in danger, and she just needs the baby in a safe place while she can get out and find a place. And so, yeah, we've done a lot to be able to make it as humane as possible for both sides. But the cradle itself is lovely. It's temperature controlled. It's secure too. So as soon as the door is open, an alarm goes off, and it's a silent alarm. And basically it's like a 911 call, but they know that it's from Hope's Cradle. And then after a minute and a half, there's a secondary alarm that's very soft, but it's to give the mother a heads up that someone will be coming shortly. And then when she closes the door, it locks. So in essence, if someone was pursuing her or someone was trying to get the baby or whatever, it would be locked and no one would be able to get the baby, which is important, especially when you talk about
Mhm.
the trafficking side of things.
So if someone needed to access Hope's Cradle,
Mhm.
how would they do that? Who would they contact?
Well, so right now, I mean, they could definitely reach out to us, but right now we have one in Strathmore, and we are working very, very hard to be able to expand it. We have 7 provinces across Canada that are speaking with us and
Wow.
interested in, yeah, yeah, it's very exciting, and but also necessary for it to be growing the way it is, because to me, like, this should be in every community. It needs to be a household name. It needs to be that a woman doesn't have to ask anyone. Again, further to the protecting the anonymity. Um,
Mhm.
and they need to be everywhere. And so we're working super hard to be able to make that happen.
So does Hope's Cradle also help to facilitate adoptions in appropriate situations?
Well, we're actually working hard at that. And it's a bit of a point of contention.
How
So,
so?
well, we've partnered with Adoption Options, and the CEO, Cheryl, is spectacular. She's actually a birth mother herself. So she has a really beautiful, in-depth lens to this type of situation, certainly the sympathy and respect towards the birth mother as well. However, the current process is that when a baby is surrendered, it goes to the hospital. And as soon as the hospital has the baby, they call Children's Services. Now, I've had conversations with Children's Services, and to say that they were frustrating would be the tip of the iceberg. Oh, they can't. I asked them, can you just tell me why you deem it better to place the baby with a foster family for whatever length of time versus placing the baby with a family that could 99% end up being the adoptive family that will keep the baby. And obviously, so there's stability, there's like all the screening. Adoptive families are screened even more heavily than foster families are. And they gave me a few different answers, and I was like, but doesn't that come down to the hospital? And they're like, yeah. So they don't really have an answer because it's not better for the baby. Why wouldn't we want to have stability right out of the gates? So I'm working really hard, but it's legislative changes that need to be made. And it's incredibly frustrating to me because it is a no-brainer between what is right and what is not as good as we could be. And yeah, so I'm working super hard to be able to change that, but it is an uphill battle, and not I'm not making friends with children's aid, which is a shame because I know that we're all on the side that looking out for the baby. There's a difference in opinion here, and I have a very hard time understanding their side.
Well, this might help you. You've never worked in government. I did briefly. My first law job was in government, and one of the things I learned when I was in government is that there's a basic fundamental ethic that runs through most government workers, and that is to justify their own existence. If you don't justify your own existence, then you don't have a job anymore. And so that is a clue that would explain why they'd want to maintain the foster care system. But I'll leave that for our brilliant viewers to work out. So coming back now to the charity, what is the Gems for Gems Empowerment Series? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So we call it Thrive. Sarah, our board treasurer, is actually heavily involved in this, and she's spectacular. So we have a few categories. We have financial literacy that Sarah, who for anyone who doesn't know, is an accountant, and she's spectacular. So she speaks to financial literacy, but she really focuses on, again, when women have already left, and the warning bells like payday loans and stuff like that. So to do your taxes, because many of them don't do their taxes because they think they're going to have to pay in, but by doing your taxes, you're eligible for different grants. And so she really focuses on very much the nitty gritty of what are the next steps. And the whole point of Thrive is to be able to clear the smoke and make it possible for you to feel like you can thrive in this next step post abuse. So we have Sarah with the financial literacy. We have a psychologist that speaks to psychological coping skills. So that's with the understanding that there are panic attacks that happen and all kinds of things that women who have left abuse and suffer from PTSD have to deal with, sometimes multiple times a day. So it's very much focused on that. And then we have a survivor from our community who has gone through everything and created a happy life for themselves, which is, it's really focused on resilience and hope and proof that you should feel hope, because you can get through and do well with your life and have happiness and marriage and all that if you want it on the other side. And then we also have self-defense, which is a real focus on preventative self-defense. So how to get out of holds, safety planning when you're walking through alleys or in garages or anything like that. And that is very much, yes, it's important as far as if someone did grab you to be able to get out, but it is very much focused on you feeling like you can do these things. And some of the women that we work with don't have the confidence to cross the street because of people in cars looking at them. Just that they feel like they're in constant prey mode, which is not a very eloquent way of putting it, but you literally feel like prey at all times. And so Thrive is very much focused on being able to put that to bed, hopefully, and make you feel like an equal in society. And give you the empowerment there.
So just talking a little bit about how these ladies come to you. So let's imagine, Jane Doe is in distress, and she's a person that you could help. How does that person find you? How does that person come to you, as opposed to some other avenue like a women's shelter or something like that?
Well, the natural way of things usually has women going to women's shelters, and it's from there when they're looking for the what's next that they look for us, or that someone will tell them about us. So, but it's very much word of mouth, and I work really hard to be able to make sure that our community is as well aware of GEMS and our opportunities as possible. But a big part of that is me ensuring there's awareness of GEMS and scholarship opportunities and such in the shelters with the women that work directly with women and men who work directly with survivors. Yeah, so it's very much the immediately leaving or when you're planning to leave, people gravitate to shelters. And as much as it should be the right call, I mean, most of them are completely full right now. There's twice in the last little while that I've tried to get someone in, and every single shelter's been completely full. So it is a very dangerous time when someone is leaving an abusive relationship. They're 75 times more likely to be murdered in the 3 weeks post leaving than they were in the relationship. And that's something that I think is really important. And there's not a lot of awareness about that, because so many people will look at someone in an abusive relationship and just say, why don't you leave? Like, you're perpetuating it, you're staying, you're keeping your children in danger. But for all of them that leave, they're all 75 times more likely to be murdered. So that is significant. And it takes an enormous amount of courage to be able to face that and find a safe place and all of that, and do it quietly enough that you're not detected.
This is something you're quite right that not enough people are aware of. And that is, first of all, the need for women's shelters, and also the limitations of women's shelters in terms of resources and space. This is something that I became aware of through many years of practicing in the criminal law, and seeing, really the limitations. And it, of course, it has many computations and permutations in terms of, the lack of choices for women who are in distress. And it ties into things like, the sex trade and so on. And drug abuse, alcohol abuse. There's a really severe problem, as you know, with Indigenous women in our country, and high incidence of homicide, which is completely, really a completely ignored problem in our society. But what do you think is driving this? Why aren't people more aware of, first of all, the number of the number of women in Canada and in Alberta even who are in distress, and the fact that there's so few resources being devoted to dealing with this problem? You would think this is a really serious problem, and impacting a very, very important segment of our population. Like, these are young women, right? We're not going to have much of a society if they can't grow into if they can't have meaningful lives. We're not going to have much of a society. And yet there seems to be a really severe lack of resources, which is where your charity comes in. What's driving that? Why aren't there more resources being devoted to this problem?
Like everything, there's several complexities that contribute to that. But I think one of the problems is that humankind has a need to feel superior. And until they're touched by it in a meaningful way, it requires being touched in some form of devastating way in order for you to get on board in any sort of significant capacity. And I think that holds a lot of organizations back, a lot of movements back. So what I'm specifically with this, I think that there's still a lot of people women and men, who will judge a woman for staying in it, or who can't imagine the man doing that because they understand that it's wrong, and they like the guy. So of course he's not doing that. Of course he would never do that. She must be lying. And then that woman becomes isolated, and the children become isolated, and it just snowballs to something that didn't have to go anywhere near as far as where it did. The other thing too is that right now there's a big push to look at more, this is the term that keeps going around, is upstream options. And that's also providing a bit of an obstacle right now, in my opinion, which is an unpopular opinion. But lots of my opinions around this are unpopular. But like there's programs where if a man agrees to doing this, I'm pretty sure it's 1 hour a week for a few months, that in exchange for him doing that and showing good behavior and good intent that they want to change, that all charges will be dropped. And there's a huge focus on having the families stay together. And to me, there's a big difference between, I mean, all of it is terrifying for especially children who witness it, but there's a big difference between throwing a lamp at a wall, say, not good, period, and choking and punching your wife, or shaking your wife or shaking your children. Like those are big differences. And punching and shaking were the two light forms of abuse that were given to me as examples of what would qualify for entry into this program and having those charges dropped. So we're kind of fighting against ourselves, which I find very peculiar. On one hand, we worked so hard to be able to get women to have the courage to leave. And then on the other hand, we're encouraging them to support these men who punch them. And what I was told was, just a punch, like just a punch. What? So then the other hand, we're encouraging them to support their partner and drop all charges. I think people make mistakes, and I think that there is room for people to be able to change and be better always. I think better, you do better. And I think that until we know better, sometimes we don't do better. However, I think there has to be some sort of understanding that, like you look at losing weight 100% helps the person. You feel better, you look better, you feel better about yourself in society. It is 100% beneficial to you. And how many people struggle with losing their weight for year after year after year after year? And it's a 100% selfish benefit. And this is not. So I think there has to be some sort of awareness piece around the likelihood of change occurring in 3 months or 2 months or however long it is. And I just feel like we're kind of competing with ourselves in our attempt. And the whole thinking behind this is that we can't continue to make more and more women's shelters because there will only continue to be more and more abusers, and locking men behind bars doesn't solve the problem. It just removes the problem for as long as the sentence is. And there is something to be said to that. But I think I just feel like society is constantly in a swing of overcorrecting, and then this is an overcorrection that has proven to be lethal many times.
Speaking of lethal overcorrections, how was Gems for Gems impacted by the COVID-19 lockdowns? How did you navigate your way through that? That must have been very challenging.
Yeah, the challenging in one sense, and then on another side, in the sense that it was very challenging, women's shelters were full or had decreased their capacity. So I was getting a lot more people reaching out to me, showing me incredibly heartbreaking pictures of what had been done to them and how desperate they were for a place to be. The biggest challenge for me was seeing a not very good side of the shelter world in Calgary. And that was very disenchanting and heartbreaking for me. In a lot of cases, the funds were there. And in my opinion, if the funds are there, then put women in hotels, do something. But it was women being turned away because beds weren't there. Like they had decreased the number of beds, but I know the funding was there. There's organizations who bonus their staff, which was to me beyond appalling in the nonprofit world. I think doesn't mean that they're not working to the extent that they would deserve a bonus. Absolutely. But at worst case, that's donor dollars. And at best case, it's taxpayer dollars. That's no. That's a no in my books. And so there was a bit of that, and then more of lots of other things that I was just heartbroken to see. So that side was really challenging. But then on the other side, that I know some organizations were letting people go for their vaccination status, and I stayed out of that entirely. We just shifted things so that we could accommodate anyone's status well. And again, I really focused on the fact that I didn't want to be turning people away who wanted to be part of making changes and making a difference through GEMS.
Are you seeing a greater demand for the services that the charity provides coming out of COVID? Because we hear a lot about the damage that COVID-19 policies have done, to families and women in particular. Are you seeing more of a demand now in the aftermath of COVID?
Yes, and like I said, strictly around trying to get beds, that's a big part of it. It's not supposed to be part of GEMS. That has now become a part of my sometimes several times a week job. But yes, what I really have seen is a lot of people from the public wanting to be a part of changing things, and GEMS is so focused on change. Our ambassador team has grown significantly. There's a lot more interest. Hope's Cradle is being championed, like I said, completely across the country. People are wanting to do things that create change rather than maintain the status quo. And that's why people are being, to me, I think that's why people are getting increasingly more attracted to GEMS.
So what's the future? What's the undiscovered country for GEMS for GEMS? Where do you want to take this?
I have big dreams. That probably doesn't surprise you.
Oh, this is a big dream that's come to fruition already. But I would be very shocked to learn if you don't have a much grander plan for it. So I'm interested to know about it.
Well, thank you for asking. My big dream with GEMS is to be able to have a physical location where we have a place for women to be able to live and learn. So to have, say, an aesthetic school within our walls, and then also have a spa attached to it. So women can live with their children, learn, and then work so that they leave with a nest egg, enough money for a car, first and last month rent, that education, and that empowerment piece. And I would love that in every major city across Canada.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's where you're going, right? You've got
that's definitely where I'm headed. And interestingly, there's that model is nowhere globally, which is pretty neat. And that's something that I really want to create. Yeah. And it's just dollars away. We have all the partnerships in place that everyone is in. It's just the dollars.
Very exciting. So if people wanted to get involved with GEMS for GEMS and volunteer their time, how would they do that?
Well, there's an ambassador application on our website. And the ambassador program is something that is very different than other volunteer organizations or volunteer capacities with organizations.
It's a great title for starters.
Thank you.
I mean, ambassador. Wow.
Well, it's chosen on purpose.
I have to daydream. Ambassador Gray. It's a nice ring.
I would love to have you. Absolutely love to have you. But the whole point is for people to be able to do what they can, when they can, and how they can, and to primarily be our presence in their community. So the term ambassador is accurate. You are physically our presence in every room that you're in. So a basic understanding of GEMS is required. And then after that, it's literally what I call a livable commitment to GEMS for GEMS and the changes that we're making. So I never want someone to feel they don't have enough time or that they have a busy time in their life so they can't commit to GEMS. It's just not about that at all. It is about empowering our team of ambassadors, our board, everyone to know that they're making a difference, even just by knowing about GEMS and bringing it up when they can and advocating wherever possible.
So the work that you're doing right now, though, is it primarily focused in and around Calgary?
Our jewelry drive is completely across the country. Hope's Cradle is expanding across the country. I want our scholarships to be able to go there. Again, that's just funding away from being possible. 100% of our scholarships have been given out in Calgary at the time, because it's important to me that where the donors give the funds, that the money stays there. So I would love to be able to have either a donor or someone that would like to see this expand across the country, and then we will open it up and expand this across the country, which would be phenomenal. And the need is certainly there. But the ambassadors are completely across the country as well. So jewelry ambassadors and Hope's Cradles across the country. Thrive has not yet, but we're looking at that. And then, yeah.
Do you have a situation? Sorry, go ahead.
No. I just live in hope that someone with means to be able to make it happen hears us and sees the value in it, because the need is certainly there.
Yes, question. So, is it a situation where there were any of the scholarships, for example, and you hear about this sometimes, it's really tragic. Some of the scholarships go unclaimed, or people actually don't even apply for them, or have you been able to actually match people up with the scholarships fully? Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of donations, if people want to donate, can they just do that through the website?
Yes. Canada Helps is a site that we are registered upon too. So they issue your tax deductible receipt immediately as well, because we're a registered charity. So that's all the different buttons on our website, and they are plentiful. You can give through there, and you'll get a tax deductible receipt.
Okay. And are there any big special events that are upcoming in the next little while that you want people to know about, where they can get involved, or maybe come out and meet yourself and some of the other members of your team, the other ambassadors?
Yeah, well, so right now, because our focus right now is on our jewelry drive, we have jewelry packing next Sunday, but we just had a big event, Brunch and Bubbles, hosted by Jerome's Appliance Gallery, and that was such a success. But at the moment, we're really focusing on our jewelry and getting the jewelry across Canada again through our ambassadors. But in the new year, there will be lots of different events, and we'll be posting them. And honestly, the best place to be able to stay up to date is to get our newsletters, which you can get. There's a pop-up on our website, and then to follow us on social media, because we put everything out on all of our social media platforms. But we also have our swag store as well, and 100% of the funds from our swag store goes directly towards our scholarship programs and our other programs. Yeah.
I've been rather remiss in not asking you this yet, but where does the jewelry go?
The jewelry goes completely across Canada. You mean as far as a drop-off location, or?
Well, how does the jewelry work? Is it in response to a donation? People get jewelry, or how does that? Because I mean, up until now, people will be thinking, well, Gems for Gems is just a quaint name, but actually, there's an actual gems involved in the whole process. Yes. We should probably let people know about this.
That's my fault, not yours.
No. I'm responsible for all this. You're just the guest.
So essentially, we collect gently used jewelry from women in the public, and then we give the gifts a good cleaning, and then package them in packages of 3 to 5 items, and then we send them across Canada to as many shelters as we can possibly do. So there's a drop-off location in Calgary at Saks Fifth Avenue in Chinook Center. And then anyone from out of town usually just sends it in, and our mailing address is on our website. But yeah, that's how it works. And then our ambassadors who live in Calgary or are in different provinces either take bags home to their hometowns and give it out on Christmas morning to the women in their shelters, or we ship them to our other ambassadors in the other provinces. So yeah, we've got 350 going to BC as well. So great.
So this is connected to the historical story you told about when you were a girl and your mother and the impact this had on her.
Yes.
Nice.
It's our founding initiative, and that was really how we got our start and the foundation that everything else has been built on.
Wonderful. Well, it's been just a pleasure talking with you today, Jordan, and learning more about you and your charity and all the wonderful people who are involved in it, the great work that is being done on behalf of these young women who are so much in need of support and help. We've talked about this so much, and it seems obvious, but we seem to forget it. If we don't have young women flourishing in our society. We don't have much of a society, and so this what you're doing is so important. And I hope that people listening to this and taking this in will take the opportunity to donate, because that's crucial. Without those donations, you can't do all this great work. So this is the part of the program where we have something called the reading list.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to ask you for a couple of ideas. I've got a couple of books. One is one that you might be familiar with, that is not is maybe has a bit of an oblique connection to what we're talking about, but it does have to do with abuse of girls. And this is a book by Abigail Schreier. It's called Irreversible Damage. And it deals with the transgender craze seducing daughters. And the reason why I raise this is because, of course, the connection between girls and women is pretty obvious. And what this book talks about is this really proliferation of propaganda about the female identity. And it's really destroying a lot of girls, especially teenage girls' lives. And so that they're not getting the opportunity even to become young women. Their womanhood is destroyed. It's preempted even before they get a chance to become young women. And so it is really a story of grand, I think, historical, heinous societal or societal abuse of girls and women. And so this is why I mentioned this one, because it really is a cautionary tale to parents who are being seduced by this whole concept of this whole transgender ideology craze, which I see frankly as a maybe the most serious attack on girls and women that's happening in our society today. Many people will disagree with that. I don't say that to criticize people who identify as transgender. I'm simply stating it as a fact that it is very, very harmful and destroying a lot of lives, and in a lot of cases results in things as severe as child mutilation. And the other book that I mentioned is maybe more on point, is one called The Body Keeps the Score. This is by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. And this book, it posits the idea that trauma is a fact of life, and it talks about veterans and their families dealing with the painful aftermath of combat. 1 in 5 Americans has been molested. 1 in 4 grew up with alcoholics. 1 in 3 couples have engaged in physical violence. Dr. Kolk here is one of the world's foremost experts on trauma, and has spent over 3 decades working with survivors. In this book, he uses recent scientific advances to show how trauma literally reshapes both body and brain, compromising sufferers' capacities for pleasure, engagement, self-control, and trust. He explores innovative treatments from neurofeedback and meditation to sports, drama, and yoga that offer new paths to recovery by activating the brain's natural neuroplasticity. So although the impetus for some of the problems that are discussed in the book is specific to veterans, it has a much broader application because it deals with this concept of trauma, which seems to be a big part of what Gems for Gems is also trying to deal with. Young girls in crisis. So those are 2 books that are on our reading list. Jordan, do you have any that you would suggest for people? And it doesn't have to be a book, and be a website or something else that you could recommend to people so that they could gain, let's say, a deeper understanding of some of the things that you've been talking about with us today.
Actually, where I was going to go was not in that direction. If you
go in
any mind.
Direction you want, any direction you want.
Okay. Further to the creating new neural pathways and returning to, or even just discovering neuroplasticity and how you can manipulate it. That was honestly something that was a really huge piece in me being able to have the capacity to immerse myself in Gems for Gems and build, because it takes a lot of strength and tenacity, and you can't come at it from a victim mindset at all, because if you do, then you're just triggered left, right, and center. You have to come in with totally different level of tenacity and the unacceptance for what you've gone through. In my opinion, that is what made it possible for me. And I have read all of the Abraham Hicks. So it's kind of self-helpy, but it is a totally different mentality than what a lot of people would naturally gravitate to, which is that victim mindset. And the whole point with Abraham Hicks and the law of attraction and all that is to take responsibility, but in a very empowering way, and to understand that you can change how you think, change how you behave, and change even what becomes your instincts through capitalizing on the fact that we all have neuroplasticity, and if we work with it, our brain can be subservient to us as opposed to the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would recommend that, especially I just pulled it up, the Astonishing Powers of Emotions. That's specifically focused on being able to alter the way you think, the way you interact with the world, the way you feel about times when you've been hard done by.
Mm-hmm.
I found it so empowering, but you do need to have a very open mind for it, because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people get upset
Mm-hmm.
when they feel that there's any implied responsibility for traumas that have happened to them. But I found it very empowering.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
One other book in this line is one that is on our reading list. It's by Dr. Viktor Frankl. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. Dr.
Mhm.
Frankl coined a term you might be familiar with called the ultimate freedom. The ultimate freedom is that you get to choose how you react to something that is done or said to you. In
Mhm.
other words, there's a little space between an action, a reaction, where you can actually decide how that is going to impact you in terms of trauma, being a victim and that type of thing. There's a decision in
Mhm.
between, and that's a very empowering idea. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about, and I think that's something to do with what Gems for Gems is all about.
Very much so.
So anyway, I want to thank you so much for being here with us, and I'm going to do something today that we've actually never done before. And I'm going to present a challenge to the businesses or business people or private donors who are watching this program. And so I'm going to pledge today from the Gray Matter podcast $5,000 to Gems for Gems.
Oh my goodness. Thank you.
And so I'm going to issue a challenge to the viewers. Anybody who's watching this, doesn't have to be that much, but give what you can. But if anybody out there who's willing to beat our pledge, I'd be happy to be second place or third place to you. But we're going to make that pledge to your wonderful charity in honor of the work that you're doing. Obviously, the people who are going to benefit from this are part of our community, the people who support us, and also because it's Christmas and it's important at this time. At least it's the belief of this podcaster on this show, that it's a time to be grateful and to give. And so that's what we're going to do. Thank you very much for being with us today, Jordan. And I look forward to hearing from you about the best ways to put that money to work, whether it's a scholarship or some other way that we can support the work of your charity.
Thank you so very much. That I did not expect that. Thank you so much. Very,
Well,
very kind of
you're
you.
not supposed to expect things at Christmas, right? You're supposed to get a bit of a surprise. So,
Thank you
yeah.
very much.
All
That's
right.
so kind.
Thank you so much for being with us today and for taking the time to help people learn more about your charity and yourself and the wonderful work that you're doing. Keep up the great work, please, because obviously our whole society and especially in Alberta, we're all benefiting from it.
Thank you very much. And I certainly will do.
All right, thank you.